My name is Marsha Robinson, and we are recording an oral history with Janet Marshall, Jeff Kuznikoff, Kathy Mulligan, Ron Garrett, John Hayda, and Al Cady as part of the Sweet MUMories Oral History Project. This project marks the 50th anniversary of the Miami University Middletown, Ohio campus. This interview is taking place on April 11, 2017 at Verity Lodge. Do I have your consent to proceed with this interview?
Yes.
So today we'd like to get started with stories from the classroom. Who wants to go first?
Passed the exams back, and one of my students was very upset with the exam. She said, how do you expect us to take these exams when you use these big words? And I said, like what? And she said, I read, according to Garrett, the terms parallel and latitude are not synonymous. And I said, we talked about parallels and latitudes. And she said, no, that word at the end. And I said, synonymous? And so I said, my wife teaches sixth grade and teaches synonyms and antonyms. And this is the honest to goodness answer. She said, well, I'm not into that English language crap. So that's probably one of my most favorite stories. Mr. Hayda will like that.
Yeah. Ron, speaking of exams, was that written in a blue book?
No, I never used blue books.
When I first taught, even the math exams were in the blue books. I think they had either 8 or 16 pages in them. And of course the exams were duplicated on those purple ditto machines. I have a syllabus. It's very sketchy, but a syllabus given out by the math department for the courses I taught my first year. And it's just one page, all the courses were on it, and written in purple ditto, and it simply refers to chapters in the book. Here's what you're going to know, topics, just cover this many chapters. And in my naive little way, I mean, my teaching has improved a lot over the years, but my lesson plan for the semester was, I took the number of pages and divided it by the number of lectures plus tests, and that was how many pages I had to cover each day. I mean, how simple can it be? But of course, I learned a lot about teaching in the meantime, so. Yeah. I remember one of the first days of class, there was a bomb scare. And word was, I don't think we had, I know we didn't have any intercom system. And I'm pretty sure the word was spread by people coming to your classroom door and saying, we have to evacuate the building, very, very discreetly, telling the instructor that had to happen, and we did. I mean, it was just somebody's idea of fun. There was nothing to it, but we did have a bomb scare back in 1966, first semester of classes.
Yeah. We had something similar to that in the middle of an exam. Somebody came to the door and said, we all have to leave. And these are my nursing students. And so I said, okay, just leave your papers. And then went outside, and I was thinking, okay, we have a little security breach here, probably. Because they were all standing outside, and I said, all right, everybody, I want arm's length between everyone standing out here. And they thought that was funny. I said, I'm serious. But no, trusting students, I think, is an important thing.
Sure.
I tell students now, they come in and take a makeup exam or something, and they say, do you want to take my, my bag or something like that? Or doesn't somebody need to watch me? I go, when I stop trusting my students, I'm going to quit this job. It's not worth it. And that really is a way to, I think, engender trust in them too. And I think that's one of the nice things about being here on this campus is the students are more, I think, in tune with the real world and trust amongst people, whether they're teachers or anything. You go to four-year schools and other campuses like that, and sometimes it's an us against them mentality. But I never got that. I never get that here at MUM. Never have.
I did have an interesting incident having to do with trust that I thought at first backfired on me, but it actually backfired on the individual student. Because this is my organic chemistry class several years ago, and I had a student who was struggling a little bit in the class. He was quite intelligent, but he didn't work as hard as he should, and I think he kind of hit the wall. And he had asked me about going to the bathroom, and I didn't prohibit students from going to the restroom in the exam at that time. And I said he could. And he came back and he finished the exam. And then another student, after the exam, had gone into the restroom and noticed that a problem was written on the mirror. So this other student took a snapshot of it with his phone and showed it to me the next day. And he said, I thought you might want to see this. I don't know who did this. And I said, yeah, I'm not real sure. And I wasn't going to say anything beyond that. But I looked at the image that the student had saved for me, and the answer was wrong. So I figured that was a bit of self-burn.
See, God knows.
So for me, it was something that happened probably about 2 weeks ago or so. We have a new department chair, and she came to observe each of us, the faculty members. So she'd come in for one session earlier in the term. We met afterwards, and she gave me some great feedback that I really want to kind of impress her and roll that into the next time she came. So I spent more time developing what we were doing that day. And that day we also happened to have a quiz that my students were doing, which we start and do the first thing when we walk in. So I go and I get my laptop set up and connected to the projector, and it's not working. It's like, all right, well, I'll turn it off and back on. That didn't work. So it's like, all right, well, it's time to start. So I pass out the quiz. It's like, all right, we'll get started on this. And then as that was going on, I tried fixing the projector again, and it still didn't work. And then this horrifying moment of, well, everything I have is on that keynote, on that presentation. So it's like, So part of me was like, do I try to email her from up here, because she had her computer out taking notes? It's like, you know what, we'll kind of roll with it. So as soon as they got done with the quiz, like, we're running into a little problem today where the projector's not working. So if you'll bear with me, we'll try to go through this as best we can. And the students were really good about it. There were a couple video clips I really wanted them to watch, but we listened to the audio of them, which I think actually worked a bit better. So I think we got a lot out of that day, and I was pleased that the students worked with me, and then my department chair was really good about the tech problem we ran into, and it turned into probably a better class without having that projector than if we were to have it.
That's good. Well, while we're talking about technology, we've had stories of technology in the classroom starting with punch cards and T-squares and chalk. Janet, I think you want to update us on how technology is changing the teaching of science. Do you have something to share?
Yeah, I have my props. Chemists always take their props. So I thought I would try and do a then and now. And obviously, I think everyone can recognize that this is an old-fashioned wooden molecular model. It's nothing in particular. I just hooked it together and added color. So this would be what I was taught with, and perhaps many of you are familiar with. And we still use plastic versions of this now, but...
Not nearly as nice.
Yes.
The wooden ones are the best.
So now, though, I tend to use iPads in my classroom. And we're very fortunate at Miami Middletown to have a class set of iPads that were acquired through a grant from the state of Ohio. And the library maintains them, and you can check them out and use them in your classroom. Students can check them out even overnight and use them. And in fact, when I went did study abroad to Italy a couple times, we had our students check out the iPads, and all of the course content was loaded on the iPads, and we carried them overseas. So they're pretty versatile in terms of teaching. But what I wanted to share with you was a couple apps that I use with my students. And these are loaded onto the library iPads. So the library's been fantastic. They'll load anything that I ask them to, and then they'll mask them onto all of the iPads, and everybody in the class can use this. And many of these apps are free, so in fact, when I even use them in classes, students will say, how can I get that on mine? Which is awesome, you know, that they're actually that interested. And this is an app in particular called Chem3D, and it opens with an absolutely, I'll show y'all,
DNA.
exquisitely beautiful image of DNA, which is not a model that I could begin to build. But what's really beautiful is that you can manipulate it. And what I love about this is you can teach this and you can show that there are actually no chemical bonds between the individual strands of DNA. And what holds the strands together is hydrogen bonding. So when you're trying to teach students the importance of hydrogen bonding and why they should care, they usually care when they show them an image of DNA. And then the other thing I use with this app is I have had the library load a lot of chemical structures for me, and they're searchable. And in this particular case, this is a a model of a carvone, and carvone exists in two forms, and our noses are sensitive to the two forms, but they smell very differently. And so when you're trying to teach something about chirality in the natural world and stereochemistry and why should you care about that, this is a great example. And so I actually have samples of the chemicals, and my students have to smell the chemical and then actually understand something about the image and get a handle on what's bonded to what and where did the name come from, and some association of maybe a smell they're familiar with an actual image of a molecule. And of course, the three-dimensional capabilities of the iPad are remarkable.
Using as many senses as possible.
Yes.
Do you make them taste it too?
I do share wintergreen lifesavers, which is one element of tasting certain compounds that smell. And then one other one that's really fun, especially when you have students who are maybe a little uncomfortable with chemistry, and they'll say, oh, I never did well in high school with this, and I don't like math, and I'm really not sure why I'm here. This is a commercial app, which is a periodic table that is dynamic. This is absolutely fantastic. This is Theodore Gray's. And with my food chemistry students, I do kind of an iPad bingo of all nutritionally important elements, and then I publish the clues that I wrote from this app on my Canvas site, and they're responsible for the information. So it's a way to get them to understand, why do you need calcium, why do you need iron, and in fact you do need selenium, even though it's toxic. But what I love about this is if you tap an image of an element, and I tapped iodine, which is a purple solid that has a really high vapor pressure, so it looks like a purple gas above a solid, and that's what's displayed. You can then tap next to it, and it brings up facts. And at one point, there was a gum sold that contained iodine as a way to get a nutritional source of iodine so that you didn't have goiters. And so, of course, one of the clues in my iPad game has to do with this gum. And so you can actually read a lot of very interesting information. So this is just fantastic ways to teach science to even students who may not like chemistry. And then, of course, we do some other applications with my students in organic. And I thought I might just share that because this was not anything that I had access to when I was a student. And I've used it now for about 7 years when the library got the iPads.
Right, just think how much that has opened up access.
Yeah.
Kathy, do you want to tell us what happened before these?
I can think of the old days, and I know that in math instruction there are tools available similar to what Janet brought up. I mean, the TI-89 calculator does three-dimensional graphing, so there you go. But when I started teaching in 1966 here, handheld calculators weren't available. Students used log tables to do computation. You look up the log of a number and add the two logs and back out of that, use the log table backwards. You could have logs of sines and cosines of angles. That saved a little bit of time. But these obnoxious, I don't know if you can get a view of this or not, but these obnoxious tables that just went on for pages and pages. In the back of every math book, there would be just these horrid things. And you had to interpolate. If your number fell between, you had to interpolate. And the interpolating wasn't always linear, and you couldn't go to too many decimals.
That's right.
Right. We didn't really use slide rules when I was teaching. And as far as the 3D graphing, I mean, to teach multidimensional calculus, like triple integrals and stuff, we had to rely on these pathetic drawings, and you can't really see a cross section. You can't see how it changes, but the technology is available now, I'm happy to say.
Was that solid geometry?
Well, this was calculus. I mean,
Oh, I'm sorry.
it's kind of an irregular shape. And I can't imagine, when you taught linear algebra, you had to row reduce the matrices by hand. Now calculators will do it for you. I mean, it's amazing, and I applaud the technology because it allows you to concentrate on the important things, the ideas, and not the tedium of all those horrid calculations. As far as using technology, I remember when we had our first computer lab in the basement of the library. I was teaching a class, math for elementary ed majors. And of course, we wanted them exposed to all the wonderful things that were just coming about. I suppose this would have been in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s. I forget when that lab was in there. but we actually did a little computer program to get the computer to do something very, very simple. But I mean, that's where we were. We weren't even into having nifty applications. It was, well, here's what they do to computers to make it do stuff. But they got a little introduction to that. And just as I look back, some of the things are just kind of humorous. One year, in all the departments, I think they did evaluations by the student of the teacher. And one year they put out the questions that were going to be on the evaluation. I mean, it was never any big secret, but this year I happened to notice it said, effective use of technology. Oh, do I effectively use technology? I didn't. I thought, well, okay, what am I going to do? Because I wanted to be able to check off that box, by God, that I had effective use of technology. So, naive as I was, and I found an opaque projector. Now, an opaque projector, I would compare it to a document reader that we have these days. This large machine that I could show the children, show the students a picture from a book. And it was, I mean, okay, I thought, well, I can check that off. I have effective use of technology. And I never used this thing again. It was a nuisance. It wasn't worth the trouble, really. And when I think back of, you know, this was the pre-calculus textbook that I, look how skinny it is, how thin it is. Now these days it would have a gazillion pictures in it and a lot of like fancy color. It's all black and white, very, very bare bones. You know, it's hard to get people to read a math book, but when they were like this, I think it was even more difficult than it is now. And it's so thin. And the same way with the class, Math for Elementary Ed Majors. This was the book we used then, and it was just all business. I mean, just hardly, no pictures. It's just math concepts, you know, concepts of mathematics. And all these different topics, I love the topics. And I think that managed to get across to the students an appreciation, but I mean, the book is about a quarter of the size of what it would be these days, and the topics are somewhat different. And then one more little thing. In the 1970s, I remember it was, I think there was even a bill passed in Congress that the United States would go metric within a certain amount of time. And by golly, we who were teaching the elementary ed majors, we knew that we had to forge ahead with that. And so we did a lot with, you know, getting people to think metric, you know, how big is a centimeter, and had to, you know, the conversions, which of course nobody cared. The U.S. never did go metric in spite of the threat that we were, let me get back here. The U.S. never did go metric because we didn't have to. But I did a great service to humankind. I got a set of these, a parent's guide to metric measurement, and I passed one out to each student in my class so that they could become metric experts. And this thing is 1 meter long. It has the centimeters broken down, and by golly, I was on a mission to make the U.S. go metric, and you know, there it is.
Nice.
Very primitive, isn't it? I mean, I was out to save the world on that, though.
I might borrow that from you.
And then I have to show you the business. The first year I taught. I think were we on trimesters then? Okay, I think I taught 3 trimesters of calculus, Calc 1, 2, and 3. And I taught math for elementary ed majors. I think I had a pre-calc, and I had a math for business majors. And this was this little skinny book here, again, a skinny book, and it had some tables in the back that they could use, and it even took them up through a little bit of differential calculus, you know, started with time value money things, which the calculations for were not fun, but, you know, the math hasn't changed, but the way of presenting it sure has. And I know that over the years my teaching methods have changed, you know. I embraced a lot of technology, especially graphing calculators. They absolutely changed the way I taught. I mean, you could teach by discovery so much easier. I learned a lot more about learning styles, and not everybody thinks the way I do. about something, and then I need to find out how somebody else is thinking about it and take it from there and present things in different ways. So, I've learned a lot about how to teach over the years. And I guess I did embrace technology, but I always think about the naysayers. And I don't think I was ever on the early adopter of things, but I came along pretty quickly. But I think back, there's always resistance to change. And I don't think I was necessarily a big resistor, but you could even think about way back when students used slates and wrote on them, and the teacher sat at the desk and taught from the desk. And when blackboards came along, or chalkboards, and the teacher was going to write on the blackboard, oh my God, her back's going to be the students. What's going to happen? Something dire is going to happen. Just like when calculators came out. Well, they won't know anything about numbers if they use a calculator. There's always an element of fear about change. But I think by and large, technology's enhanced the way I teach.
Well, can we talk about enhancing the facilities on campus when we added Levy Hall? Can we talk about adding more classroom space and things about that?
Yeah, Levy Hall was, at least for natural sciences and chemistry, it was something that had to be done, because where we were in the space in Johnston Hall was beyond inadequate. We could not expand our curriculum, we couldn't offer new classes, we couldn't expand our course offerings because we simply did not have the room. We were teaching all of the all of the zoology and all of the botany courses, except for A&P, in one room.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and the chemistry had 2 rooms, but that was for all organic and all inorganic chemistry. It was a great boon to have all of a sudden all this space. It was like I remember moving from a 1-room apartment into a house, and I moved all my stuff off the truck and I put it in the living room. I go, whoa, it's in the corner of the living room, just like that. We moved everything over, and there were growing pains though. We were anticipating this move for quite a while, and in anticipation of this, in the run-up, we had made some plans of saving our money, being frugal in our uses of materials money or for our supplies and like that in the run-up. And then with the promise we would have this money when we moved into the new building. And of course we moved in, and it took us a summer or so to do that. And when we got there, we were getting ready to buy all this new equipment. We were going to teach these new courses with this great equipment and everything, and the money had gone somewhere else somehow. But our colleagues in chemistry came to the rescue, and we shared. They lent us materials and let us share different pieces of equipment, spectrophotometers and things like that over the years that we needed, until we could cobble together other small grants and scrounge from Oxford and things like that. But we made it happen. But boy, it was a real boost to the entire program. Chemistry and natural sciences to move over to Levy Hall. And besides, Levy Hall is one of the prettiest buildings on campus, I think, too. Students like that atrium there.
I have to say, the lab design for chemistry is fantastic. The fact that we have glass walls and then a glass wall to the outside, so that you can be in a laboratory and see outside, which is just wonderful, especially if you're in a lab for 3 hours or something like that.
People could walk by and see us doing science.
Yes, it was very, I guess, advanced thinking on how to design a lab, because most chemistry labs, especially like the ones in Oxford and Hughes Hall, are in the middle of the building where there are no windows. There's no sense of what time of day it is, what the weather is, or anything. And this is actually much better. Well done.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, Mickey Sarkis was the one that put all that together, and to run her program and we still, Jim Janik and I still call the building Mickey Build. Because it was. She was the force behind it. She ran her world-renowned chemical education program out of that building. we all just kind of rode her coattails along and enjoyed every minute of it, because she was very generous with her time and her resources.
And of course, that started in the basement of Johnston Hall.
That's right.
The law office. And of course, in the way back in the beginning, there was no Theskin Hall even. Everything was done
In Johnston.
in one building. But at that time, I think there were probably only 20 or 25 faculty members, so there weren't that many different offerings. I think back then, most of the students I taught were headed to Oxford to complete their degree. They were all students who would be transferring at some point.
John, you teach literature, but also film. Did things change over the years of what kind of equipment you could use in the classroom?
Well, I started here in 1981, and my first semester, my teaching assignment was 4 sections of English 111. So I started thinking about maybe teaching something else. 111 is my favorite class, but 4 sections of it may be a bit much. So after a semester or 2, I offered a film class, but because I was new and film didn't have any real presence in Middletown, I think I was lucky to get 5 or 6 students to sign up, and I had to cajole the coordinator into allowing me to teach it. So the first 2 or 3 years teaching film was a struggle. And when you teach really small classes, it's not as engaging as when you have a full class. So then in, I think about 1985, Oxford came to the rescue because some faculty over there created Introduction to Film Studies, which was a 200 level class, which meant we could offer it in Middletown. And so I started offering that class, and I probably taught more sections of that than anybody in Miami ever, because I taught it at least once a year during the regular school year. I always taught it in the summer, and there seemed to be a steady clientele for the course. But when I first started teaching the class, all that was available was 16 millimeter.
Right, I was going to ask you.
And I had to order it from Oxford, and they had all the classics, but that meant that I pretty much had to teach films from, like, say, 1815 up to about 1945. Now that didn't bother me because I was well versed, I guess, if I was at all, in those older films, because that was the canon for film studies when you were in school. So the films would come over in either 2 or 3 canisters, and you had to stop the projection a couple of times sometimes to change reels. And my favorite story of this technology was one day I was teaching in, I think, probably 104 Johnston Hall, which is a little wider than it is long. And I was projecting on the screen in the room, and the width of the room was the students sitting across in front of me. So I had to push the projector as far back as I could to get as much of the image on the screen. And I pushed it far enough back that the take-up reel was stuck against the wall, which I didn't notice. And then after...
You see where this is going.
After half of the film was over, I just happened to look down. There was a huge amount of spaghetti on the floor. So that was kind of embarrassing. But I don't remember how that class went. But anyway, the thing about that was I always had to order the films well ahead of time because the shuttle had to bring them over. And I remember one day, I think 1986, this is how bad it gets. I was in the lounge and Phil Hines came in and said the shuttle exploded. And everybody else was like somehow dialed into this and knew what he was talking about. But my only concern was how I was going to show a film later that day, because if the shuttle didn't get over here, what was I going to do? Okay, then by the late 80s, we got to VHS, which those were the golden days of teaching film because, unlike CDs, who I consider in some ways a regression, with VHS, if you're teaching, you can set each VHS tape exactly where you want it and pop it into the machine. It starts playing right away, no wasted time. If I want to show excerpts from CDs, you have to sit through the roaring MGM line, and then you have to look at the menu, and then you have to hit play, and then you have to somehow fast forward to the moment in that chapter. So annoying. So I held out for a long time and would bring VHS tapes to class. My students started finding that more and more amusing. As VHS, became more and more in the background and CDs emerged.
Quaint.
Yeah, and then the last phase of my experiences with technology was really the emergence of YouTube. And this is really kind of the intersection of technology and pedagogy, because back in the days when I only had 16 millimeter, you couldn't really get students to work with the film outside of class because they don't have a collection of 16 millimeter
projectors
stuff at home, and even if they did, they're not going to wade through 30 minutes of screen time to get to a moment they can write about. But with VHS, that became a little more possible. By the time we got to YouTube, you could develop more assignments that engage students with closer readings of the material, because they could find the stuff on YouTube themselves. And then, of course, when we got to stuff like Blackboard and Canvas, you could post links to these YouTube videos, and they could go right to their own Blackboard site and bring up the excerpts and watch them. And then even if they missed class, they could watch the film at home. So the last film class I taught, Alternative Traditions in Film, was a really good example of how YouTube made a big difference, because a lot of that stuff's very obscure. You're not going to find it in any video store. And yet a lot of that alternative stuff, we're talking videos that are 15 minutes long, 20 minutes, 5 minutes, it's all there on YouTube. So, because that's the kind of film that demands that you watch it repeatedly to get much out of it, YouTube's perfect for that, and it made a big difference.
And you're not carrying around stacks of tapes, discs,
Canisters.
canisters, film canisters.
Jeff, do you want to take us to the next step of how students are using the internet, and do you work with websites now?
Not websites. So one of the ways that I use technology in my introduction to organizational communication class is we use some social media software that basically just listens to social media and it pulls in content from Twitter or Facebook or RSS feeds or blogs. So in that class, what I have students do is they pick an organization, and then we use an online program called Nuvi, which is social media monitoring software. And they'll put in a search query. So I had a student who at the time was wanted to follow United Airlines. So we just focused on Chicago, just timely since the problems they were having then pale in comparison to the problems they're having now.
Really?
He wanted to look at United Airlines Airlines. So we focused just in Illinois. So basically we set up this monitor to collect any tweets that involve United Airlines, either hashtag or at their account or involve the words United Airlines. And it just so happened that there was a fire at Midway Airport in the control tower, so there were massive delays, understandably. So he was able to get tens of thousands of tweets about United Airlines, and we were able to actually look at that content and see what people were saying on social media about that particular event. In that class, I have each student kind of pick an organization that they might be interested in, and that ranges from where they might actually be working and have worked there since high school in like a small local mom and pop type shop, to United Airlines or larger corporations. I had one student that wanted to look at DC and the Superman Batman movie that was coming out and what people were saying about that on Twitter. So that's when we were kind of engaging students in what's going on well outside of the classroom, but still relating to what we're talking about with the content in organizational communication. And I also think it's kind of a practical exercise for them too, because then they can go to a job interview and say, well, I had done this analysis and I looked at this and here are some things that I found. And I think that was an interesting way to potentially engage students in some of social media outside of the classroom, but also connect it back to what we're talking about.
Throughout the stories that we've collected, there's been a lot of themes about industry working with the university and us designing classes or doing research projects or field placements, except, Ron, you said that there was a time when people didn't consider geographers for community development. Do you want to talk about that?
The thing is that in most countries in the world, geography is taught as a rigorous subject through all grades in high school. And in the United States, for the most part, it is not. And in all my years of teaching, I had one student come to the university to major in geography. One student that had an interest in geography. And of course, talking about high tech, the problem is that they had absolutely no idea or knowledge of maps. And what's really amazing to me is that I taught very quickly map projection, which is the transfer of the surface of a sphere onto a flat surface, which requires all kinds of high tech just to get it to look correctly. And one of the worst projections I've ever, back to the 1500s, is the Mercator projection, which is a cylindrical projection, basically projecting the sphere onto a cylinder, which you then open up. The thing is that I was listening to NPR less than a week ago, and they were talking about how students should realize that there are other projections besides the Mercator projection. Now, I was in geography education, graduated in 1961, and we were taught then that that was absolutely not to be a projection that you used in elementary or classrooms. That was, and they're still talking about this projection. But maps and outline maps is about as high tech as I could get. Probably the best story I have is the projection or the outline map I used for the United States. And one of the students came up after class and said, "I'm so glad I took this course because I never could understand, since Hawaii and Alaska are at the same place on the map in the lower left corner, why Alaska was so cold and Hawaii was so warm." Now, that's a story that goes throughout the whole thing of geography, and it's almost unbelievable, the lack of knowledge. I had a nursing instructor looking at my physical geography book in the faculty lounge, and she said, "I had this in 9th grade in Israel." You know, so you're starting out at quite a different level, and to try to teach about projections and to try to move it. That's what I was asking Kathy about solid geometry. Thank goodness in high school I had a course in solid geometry, which was a good preparation for being a geographer. That I started at university in '57, but it was a thrill to have that background, and proving theorems in solid geometry was a little more challenging than plain geometry. But obviously, geography now has, when I took my cartography course at the University of Minnesota, everything was India ink on vellum.
Yeah.
And you'd spend hours on a map, and somebody would come through and bump your elbow and knock the Indian ink, and you were very close to killing that person because of the number of hours that you had to work on developing a map. But of course now it's all high-tech, and my son, who's 30, works in store location analysis, and that's a big part of geography now, GIS and GPS. And he works on models, gravity models, to locate grocery stores all over the Midwest. He works in Kansas City, Missouri, and works for Associated Wholesale Grocers, which has 4,000 stores. And all of this is geographical in terms of modeling the population, the income per population grid area. All of that is high tech now. And he understands all this. And of course, it's also been used in gerrymandering, because of course now gerrymandering, politicians pick their voters rather than voters picking their, and all of that relates to geography. And of course, I think that if you could use geographical information systems to make sure that every congressional district had an equal number of Republicans and Democrats, which would make the representation in this democracy a little better in Washington. So geography is employed now in very high tech in all kinds of things, but store location analysis is one of the places where geographers make a lot of money. And in my career, I've had at least 2 of my students come to me and say that they, meeting with the career person, oh, what are you majoring in geography? There's no jobs in geography. And it happened that I went to the dean, who was my undergraduate advisor, and told him about this, and he went down and talked to this person, and he had a lot of wounds at the end of this. Because of course you can't go to war without good maps, and so on and so forth. But in America, I saw just recently this 4 young people, and they were arguing as to whether the Atlantic Ocean was on the east coast or the west coast, and they finally came to the conclusion the Atlantic Ocean was on the west coast. So there's a lot of work for geographers left to do.
Okay. What I'd like to do is change gears now and talk about how you came to your classroom. How did you get a job? What brought you to Miami University, Middletown? How did you find your job? I'd like to start in Minnesota. Please.
I have a really, it was 1974, and I was looking for a job, and the geography is not a very large discipline, so we have a brochure called Jobs in Geography that comes out every month or so. And there was one for here. And so I went over to the library, and this was the University of Minnesota, Duluth, which is about as far out in Tule as you can get. And there was a catalog from Miami University, and right next to it was this little catalog about so thick, about 1/4 of an inch thick. And it said Miami University, Middletown, and it was kind of a reddish maroon cover. But the part that was so amazing to me is I opened it, and the first page was white, in cursive pink. Across the front page, in handwritten cursive pink, was Bunny Hollow. So that was my introduction. And when I came here to interview in '74, the chairman of my department took me to the Middletown, central downtown shopping area, City Center Mark or whatever. What's it called?
City Center Mall, I think.
City Center Mall.
Yeah.
But we walked through it, and they were just putting down gravel and beginning to put on the roof for this thing. And I said, don't they know this is not going to work? And I said, as geographers, this didn't work in Kalamazoo, and I named 2 or 3 other places it didn't work. And I said, I thought that our department was in store location analysis. I said, it is. And did you offer? We came over and offered, and they didn't want any local help. They knew it all. So now it, of course, is now back to just streets and sidewalks and sky, but it failed completely. But that's a good example of how geographers, my first opinion of Middletown, and then there was Lake Middletown and a variety of other geographical faux pas. But to talk about Al, I was the first one in my family to go to university. So when I came here, and most of the students, 85% of the students' parents did not have a college education, which is the opposite of Oxford. And the average age was about 28, and I was 21 when I started university. And so I generally refer to the students here as being brand new, but it was so wonderful. One person referred to the students in Knockford as pubescent yuppies. And I taught over there quite often, but teaching here was such a joy compared to teaching over there.
Yeah, because we could, and that was one thing that I loved when I first came here. In Johnston Hall, where I was, it was myself, English, French, business, chemistry, English, and social studies, or sociology. And so we were all there, and it was like a big cauldron mixing of ideas and everything, and cultures.
Yeah.
I mean, we have, by building Levy Hall and like that, we kind of siloed ourselves a little bit. I still teach over in Johnston Hall, and I still go up there slumming every now and then to talk to them. But it's not the same. John and I used to throw stuff at each other through our office doors. In the summer, we would get bored in the summer and throw baseballs and things back and forth in the hallway when no one else is around. But that's what I loved about it, is because it was a real community. And I could, if I needed to complain about something, Ron's always there. He's always a good ear. And I had people that would help mentor me when I got here too. Like, I still remember Gene Coakley. I was trying to get, I was on a 10-year run. I was trying to get everything done. And Gene Coakley, who was right across from me, he said, "Al, you don't have to do everything today. Take a breath." And, things like that.
One of them.
I really enjoyed that.
Jeff?
Kathy and I had a colleague, Mrs. Yang, and Kathy, she was born in Trinidad, and wonderful lady. But I just wanted to mention, anytime I wrote anything, I took it over to the math professor, Yang, to check it over to make sure it was right. But I just wanted to mention that if you watch PBS News in the evening, John Yang is on every evening, and that's her son, so he's a product of this area.
So you'd asked about how we ended up at
How did you
Middletown.
find us? Yes, how did you find us?
So I was doing my doctoral program at Ohio University, and I finished that in 2012. And then I had a change in plan, so I adjuncted for a year there. So from spring, 2012 into 2013. And I saw an ad on CritNet, which for the communication discipline, that's our listserv. And there's one for Miami University that I saw was in Ohio. And I ended up applying, and they were looking for 2 tenure track lines, one on the Middletown campus, one on the Hamilton campus. And coincidentally, John Hayda was the search chair for that. So one of my early introductions to Miami was emails with John. Yeah, so I am his fault.
Yeah.
So I gathered my application materials and submitted those, and didn't hear anything for, it might have been like 2 months, to the point where I kind of gave up. And then for whatever reason, I looked on LinkedIn and it said somebody from Middletown, Ohio has looked at your profile. I was like, that sounds really familiar. Why does Middletown, Ohio sound familiar to me? And when I went and looked, it was like, oh, that's why. I'm like, okay, so if they're looking at it 2 days ago, there's clearly some still hope there. And then I think 2 weeks passed, and then I got an email or a call from John that kind of apologized for the delay. And said, we'd like to set up a phone interview with you, and we scheduled that for a couple days out. So I called in. John explained that you'd be talking to people both at Middletown and Hamilton, so there was this odd telephone conference going on, but talked with them and had a good conversation, and I thought it went well. I didn't feel like I could have done anything differently. And then a couple weeks roll around and hear nothing, so it's like, all right, well, that's not gonna pan out. And then I think I got an email from John that said, apologize for the delay, but we'd love to invite you to campus. And that was a whirlwind of an interview because it was on all 3 campuses. Yeah. So I was in the Drury Inn suites and had been set up there by one of the administrative assistants. And the first day was almost entirely at Middletown, I think. And then the second day was at Middletown and then Hamilton. And then the third day was a real quick stop in Middletown. And then I went to Oxford, and then I was done, which actually placed me the furthest out from where I lived out of all of the visits. But had a really good conversation interview. I remember, John, you telling the story of the shuttle blowing up because part of my teaching presentation was about groupthink, and we talked about the Challenger, and when we finished, John shared that story, which I thought was really humorous. And then got the call about a week later from Rob Shorman, who was the dean at the time, or one of the assistant deans, and was given an offer and called them back the next day to kind of formally accept, and then ended up here. And one of the early memories I have from the first semester teaching was probably Joan's film class, because I was in Johnston 106, and I think you're in Johnston 104, and it was a 7 to 9:50 p.m. class, and for me it was advanced interpersonal communication, and the walls in Johnston are just metal, so it echoes a lot, to the point where I thought the sound was coming from behind me, because it's echoing off of that wall. And my students are looking at me because you hear like boom and all these sounds going on. It was distracting. So I was like, I just had a long day, so I kind of stormed over to the door, opened up my door, and went over and just opened up that door and went in and was like, excuse me, can you turn the volume down a little bit? And then like a head moved out from behind a monitor, and I see the reflection in John's glasses, and I realized it was John, and I felt bad about it, but he turned it down a few times, but I was like, I felt like
Probably some war movie.
it was probably something. I felt like a little bit of a jerk, because John was a really good search trainer, and I had a good experience, and then almost yelled at him in front of his class practically. But that's how I ended up at MUM. Yeah.
Anyone else? How did you find Mom?
I'd say that Mom found me. I'm a Middletown native, and I had gone to grad school right after college and got my master's. I was in like a PhD track, but I just wanted to take time out. So I taught math at Fenwick High School for a couple years, and at that time, I mean, I knew a lot of math, but I was regarded as the young person, and they gave me all easy classes, and there were people with seniority who got all the classes I would like to be teaching. And so when I found out the campus was coming here, I made an application, and my professors from UC gave glowing recommendations, and next thing I know, I have an interview over in Oxford with Elwood Bone, who was the department chair at the time. And we, things went well, and I really forget what we talked about, a little bit of math, a little bit about teaching and my experience. And then I guess that was what made it happen, but then I had an interview with Dr. Bennett. He had to put his kind of seal of approval on it. So it was his office was, I think, is there a room over there?
Yes.
That's where his office was. And and Dallas, his secretary, had a desk right here in front of the fire, well, perpendicular to the fireplace. And I came and chatted with Dr. Bennett, and then that was pretty much it. Dr. Bone called and said they would be happy to have me, and I stayed. I never pursued the PhD. In those days, to do advanced work in math, you had to have a reading knowledge of German and French, because things weren't easily translated. And I was on top of the French actually in grad school. One of my textbooks was in French, so okay, I was okay with the French, but I thought, well, I'll take some time off and learn German, and then I'll head back to UC. And anytime I saw Dr. His name was Lipsick, the head of the department at UC, he would say, "Are you coming back?" Well, to make a long story short, and I started teaching here in '66, and in the summer of '67, I married Larry, and then we had 6 kids, and that was 6 was the magic number, and that's as far as my PhD went. But I had a wonderful teaching life here anyway.
Other stories about how you found Mom?
Real short. I just finished my postdoc down in Memphis, and I'd been in research for so long, I said, I want to get back in the classroom. So I called up a friend of mine here in Oxford, and she had been teaching at Hamilton, named Ann Ripstra, Dr. Ripstra. Mm-hmm. And she and I knew each other from Spiderville, doing spiders together for all those years. We knew each other as graduate students. Called her up and said, what's happening at Miami? So she gave me Bob Sherman's name, who was the chair of biology, and Donna Claren's name, who was the coordinator of math science here. And so I put the names in, I talked to them briefly on the phone, said, I'm looking for a place to be. And this was in probably March of that year. And I said, okay, well, I kept looking. And finally there was a call, the guy who's here had taken another job, this is in May, can you come up for an interview? And I go, yes. Yes, and besides, my wife was looking around for a residency program for her career. So we came up, we stayed at Red Roof Inn or something up in West Carrollton. We came down here, it was going to be early morning with Donna. We stopped at a Hardee's, we're eating, I ordered biscuits and gravy, and I dumped the whole thing in my lap. Yes. Yeah. So here I am with khakis covered with biscuits and gravy for my job interview. We didn't have time to go back and change, so I cleaned up best I could. Donna thought it was funny. Which really kind of set the tone and gave me, oh, this is what this place is like. And the more I looked around and everything, the more I liked it, and apparently they liked me. And, you know, been here since. That was 27 years ago.
I got here in 1981, and I had been teaching at what it is now Missouri State in Springfield, Missouri. And in those days, it was known as Southwest Missouri State. I was on a 3-year contract there, and I finished my dissertation while I was there. So I had a number of interviews, and I had some other opportunities when I came up here. But my parents and my sisters lived in Dayton. I went to junior high in Cincinnati, so I knew the area. And I don't know, I had lived in Ohio before. I mean, the alternatives were, I could have gone to Utah State. I probably would have got the job offer at University of Texas, El Paso. And there were some other possibilities, but I decided to come up here. There are a couple of reasons. One was that from the interviews, I could see that in some ways it was best of all possible worlds, because I was always interested in teaching at a 2-year school. And MUM at the time was a 2-year school. And then also was within easy driving distance of a major university with plenty of resources. And from interviewing with the English department people, I could see there were opportunities to do things over there. So there was that. And then also Middletown is a steel town. And I went to undergraduate and graduate school in Pittsburgh. In fact, I've lived in a city with a steel town for 49 of the last 52 years. So it all just seemed to work out. And it was a little strange to move into a small city, but being close to Cincinnati and Dayton, it never really seemed like it was confining. I always lived in Middleton. A lot of faculty lived in Oxford or, you know, Cincinnati or Dayton suburbs, but I always lived in Middletown. And maybe because it's a steel town, I'm not sure.
That's what you wanted to name the mascot, right?
Well, Steelers, yeah.
Yeah, so I came to Middletown by a route that I guess a lot of people who are lecturers often come to Middletown, and that was, I had come to Cincinnati from graduate school in California to work for Procter & Gamble. I worked for Procter & Gamble as a research scientist for 7 years. I was pregnant with my second child and balancing a lot of things, and so took time off. Then I went back and started working as an adjunct instructor at UC Blue Ash. Then I taught a year of high school chemistry at Wyoming High School, which is the town in which I live, and knew I really wanted to go back to college teaching. So someone told me that Oxford was looking for someone to teach summer organic, and I had taught organic at Blue Ash. And then someone else had told me, and there was a positioning up at Middletown. So I had interviewed with my colleague Susan Marine, and it looked like that I would be getting a visiting assistant professor position at Middletown. But before that, I got the summer position at Oxford. So I actually interviewed with the department chair and one of my colleagues, Rich Taylor, at Oxford, and got that summer position. So I started at Oxford and then came up to Middletown the academic year that followed. And then I was a visiting assistant professor for 4 years, and since that has a limited time, I started putting my information together to look for more permanent positions. And I had asked a few of my colleagues for recommendation letters, and one of the people I asked was Kathy Bishop Clark, and she said, "Why?" And I explained, well, I'm not going to sit here and wait till year 5 and then start looking for a job. And she said, let me see what we can do. And there had been a faculty hiring freeze at that point for several years. So Rob Shorman and Mike Pratt were fantastic and offered me a position as a lecturer. And so I transitioned from a VAP to a lecturer. And that was kind of the first permanent, I guess, full-time faculty hire for about 2 years at that point. So that kind of started, I think, the growth again. So I really appreciate them going to bat for me. And then I was promoted last year to senior lecturer. So kind of a traditional, a path that I think a lot of lecturers wind up coming up through the VAP track, I'll say it that way.
The original committee that planned this university here in Bunny Hollow was hoping for a college that would not only teach technical skills, but also make polished citizens with some culture, etc. They wanted a place of opportunity for the children of the people who worked at the steel mills and the paper mills. What is it like to teach people who are here for opportunity, not entitlement?
I don't think so much of the children of the Armco employees. I think, when I think of people who are here not with a sense of entitlement, in my classes for math for elementary ed majors, I had a lot of women who were older than I, who had dropped out of college and were coming back to get a teaching degree. And I mean, I don't know how much I enriched them, but they certainly enriched me. I mean, having the diversity of ages in the classroom and having, you know, mature people who really knew how the world worked, and I think they were good models for some of the younger students. But I don't necessarily think of anybody who felt entitled. These ladies were going to make a career for themselves, kind of, you know, once removed from the raising families and such. And it was nice to have that diversity in the classroom.
I think some of the students that I've had have noted that they're the first in their family to go to college, the first generation to have that opportunity. And I think for them it's transformational in nature. What I mean by that is that they might be working an hourly job and they kind of know that there's a limited shelf life for how long that would support them, with inflation being what it is and hourly wages not keeping pace with that. So for them, I think they view it as a significant opportunity, and I don't think they take that for granted. And I found that many of my students work very hard, despite maybe not having the best high school background or having gone to the best high school, but they work very hard and they're eager to learn. So when we do talk about these concepts or things in class, they really engage in them. The other thing that I noticed pretty quickly is one of the classes that I teach regularly is a 400 level conflict management class, communication conflict management. And I'm glad that I teach that here, and particularly with a non-traditional student base, because when you're talking about some things in conflict, the traditional college student just doesn't have enough life experience. So when we're talking about divorce, for example, I've had people who have recognized that the divorce they're going through, they're connecting those concepts almost as they're reading it. And I've had a couple students say that actually what we were doing helped them when they were working through their divorce, or helped them learn about conflict. And I don't think, through no fault of their own, that traditional college students would make that leap, because they just haven't been around for that long. But when it's a student who hasn't had the opportunities to go to the best high school, let's say, and make those connections, I think that's a really transformational moment for them, and that's something that I'm really excited to be a part of and thankful for.
I think teaching some of the older students is, many of them would be wives of people working at Armco and so on. But I remember one lady in particular, sort of a problem that Oxford faculty had was they would talk down about the regional campuses and the quality of the education here and so on. And she was in a course in Oxford, quite a large room, and toward the end of the semester, the professor was bad-mouthing this campus and the quality of the students. And my student stood up and said, "Professor so-and-so, I got the highest grade in the first exam in this course. I got the highest grade in the second exam in this course. I've gotten top grade in everything I've turned in. And I expect that I will get the highest grade on the final in this course. And as far as I'm concerned, the quality of education on the regional campus is far greater than it is here. Faculty members are more than pleased to keep their office hours and to see students as they have problems and need extra care. The services of the campus are very good. And as far as I'm concerned, you're probably one of the worst lecturers I've ever had in my whole career of being at university." And she got up, and the whole class applauded her. And he looked like, well, you can judge what I'm going to say. But I think the quality of, I had quite a few students. One of my students graduated Phi Beta Kappa, went to Tennessee to work on a degree in transportation. And the thing is that some of the best and most wonderful, most of my friends are former students. And one of them has his own store location analysis building out of Germantown, does a store work location for Kroger's Corporation, and he's known as one of the best store location analysts he trained my son, one of my former students. And so, he just threw an 80th birthday party for me, so that gives you some idea of the entanglements I have. But I could not say enough wonderful things about the students that I've had at Miami Middletown. It's just been a phenomenal, I couldn't have had a more wonderful career.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of the teachers we've launched from this campus. The people who've gone into teaching and education that were launched on this campus too. I mean, we have a good number of really solid, respected teachers out there.
John?
Yeah, back to the way you framed this, opportunity versus entitlement. One thing we sometimes gloss over or forget is that because the campus is relatively small and class sizes are small, students have an opportunity to interact with classmates and the instructor to a much greater degree than they would if they were taking the same course in Oxford. This doesn't apply to all courses, but for example, with the film studies class, if I were to teach that in Oxford, they would set the enrollment limit at 40 to 50, and they would get that many. And when you have a class that size, you pretty much have to resort to lecturing. And when it comes to evaluation, you pretty much have to assign short answer and multiple choice maybe. I'm not sure how you would do it, but you wouldn't have the opportunity to ask them to write that many papers. With the way I taught film studies here, I would have enrollments of 20 to 25. So I organized the course around lots of discussion. All assignments were writing assignments, short and long. And when you're teaching courses like that, you learn a lot about how to engage students and interact with them, and you can build on that, and it makes a big difference. And there are a lot of opportunities there that you aren't going to get if you're in a class that's large. When I was an undergraduate, all my classes were lecture classes. The only class I really remember, though, is the one where the instructor invented some ways in which we could work in small groups. That was very revolutionary at the time. You would write down everything the teacher said, and then you'd put it back in the blue book 2 or 3 times a semester, and that's how you got through.
Yeah, the opportunity versus entitlement. and just to go off of what Ron and John said, the students here don't take their time here for granted.
Yep.
They don't. The students, I mean, I've taught in Oxford a number of times, and don't get me wrong, they're wonderful students, they're very smart, they're driven, but they think that, you know, we owe them something in a way. I just get that feeling. Students here are here because they want to be here. They got jobs, they have families. They're working their time, and they appreciate anything we can do to help them, and they work hard. And the students that are the younger students really look up, and it's so funny, we're talking about the older students. When they're in the classroom, they come in, they talk to me before or after class going, oh, everybody's so young, and then they're so smart, and they're so fast. And I go, listen, you haven't got anything to worry about.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know how to work, you know how to use your time, and you know what it takes, you know what work is. And usually by the time, especially in the lab courses that I teach, in the lab courses there, you find the younger students gravitating towards them. Because they know how to get things done, and they know how to organize things. They always become the group leaders, and so they do just fine. But again, that's another example of they're not taking it for granted. And this is why I will go out of my way. Their car didn't work, or their grandfathers have a heart attack, or their parakeet's sick, or something that is real in their lives. I couldn't get the school's off and the school for a snow day, and I couldn't get a babysitter. I say, relax, we'll work it out, you know? And they look at me and they say they would never do stuff like that in Oxford.
Yeah.
And I go, well, that's Oxford's problem then, because we're here to help you learn. And I think that really serves us and the community much better.
I never restricted telephones, especially in my night classes, because many of the students were older and had children at home and so on. And I said, you know, just put it on vibrate if you can or whatever. And so the lady sitting close to the phone, her phone went off, and she left the room and came back and she said, Mr. Garrett, I'm sorry, I have to leave. And I said, okay. She said, I'm on call to fix the MRI machine at the hospital. And I said, I've never heard that excuse.
You know, I'm sorry.
One quick one. I had this lady from Westchester, and she started a freshman, and she graduated 4.0 from it could have been 4.6 or something. But I introduced her to NPR and PBS and All Things Considered and Morning Edition, and she was hooked. And so I told her one day that Boehner is talking about cutting funds for NPR, and she said, he lives next door to me. I'm going to give him, he never mentioned it again.
Janet?
You know, I'm just thinking a bit about some of my students from the regionals who've really gone on and achieved very impressive things. And since I teach organic chemistry, I teach a lot of students who aspire to pre-professional and graduate schools. And so I kind of am thinking about what is a common characteristic of some of these students. And I would say several things. One is I've had some students who've had military experience. So maybe they started college, it wasn't for them, they went to the military and came back. And talk about work ethic and dedication and just perseverance. You know, one of my absolute finest students who's finishing dental school this year was in that situation. And then I think about students who don't want to go into huge amounts of debt, and their parents don't necessarily have a huge bank account to fund their undergraduate education, and they're saying, well, I'm going to do 2.5 years at the regionals and then pick up my classes at Oxford to get my degree in biology or chemistry. And so it's pragmatic. And they also like smaller classes, and our labs are faculty taught, as you mentioned, Val. And so it makes a big difference in, I think, what you gain from the course. And then I also think about some of my students who are kind of shy, who, you know, kind of like science. I was pretty good at math, but I was a little shy. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And they blossom. You know, they learn how to think in a small class. They can't hide because it is a small class, and it is a small lab, and everything's graded by me. Yeah. And so, you know, they really rise to, I think, their potential. And I think about a student like that right now who's, you know, just finishing her first year of pharmacy school at UC. You know, she wrote me one of the most lovely letters and said, "You really taught me how to write a lab report." And I'm not beat everything into all of you to write a lab report. But you know, it's a very gracious note because at the time nobody enjoyed that experience. You know, so I think it's all of those kinds of things. And then the other one, and I know we've had some common students who started at other institutions. So they were competitive students. They got into schools that have, you know, fairly stringent admission requirements, and it just didn't work out for them. Maybe they, you know, were too smart and partied too much, or had family responsibilities and came back home, and took classes at the regionals, and they've been exceptional, absolutely exceptional. And it's just, you know, a redirection of where they're going to get their start. And I will say that I believe the students who have gone through the science curriculum at the regionals unequivocally remark on how much they've learned.
They can hold their own anywhere they go too.
Absolutely.
And that's one thing I know. When I first came here, I started teaching upper level classes here on the regionals. My colleagues in Oxford were watching the students that were coming up afterwards, and I never heard anything, because I think our science faculty here and everybody, just they give them that, here you go, show them what you're made of.
And I'll give credit to my Oxford colleagues as well. When I have students who want to major in chemistry and biochemistry, you know, we have that conversation. I have that conversation with my colleague in advising. I have a conversation with some of my colleagues who have undergraduate research opportunities, and say, you know, I want to shepherd over this individual to you. And one of our ELC students is graduating this May with a degree in chemistry, and he was one of those who, you know, I made a phone call and asked if the student could join the research group, and by the way, could you maybe get him some summer scholars money, and he'll be exceptional, and he's just been a star. So, you know, we have a close relationship with students, and we have a close relationship with our colleagues to help that transition. And I think that's made a big difference for many of ours.
I was at Goodwill last Saturday and just come out of the store, and somebody shouted, "Mr. Garrett, Mr. Garrett." And it's a gal that had me back in '96. Stop me. How are you? You know, and she said, "Yours was the toughest course I had in my." She said it was wonderful. They keep coming out of the woodwork, you know.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no.
When you're 80, there are more of them coming out of the woodwork.
So I have two questions to kind of wrap this up. The first question I'd like to ask is this. Give some advice to somebody who's going to start working here in 3 years. What would you like for them to know about teaching at MUM?
Talk to people. Don't try to do it on your own. Use your resources here, use your resources in all the campuses, and talk to people. They'll help you. If we hire somebody here, and I tell this to everybody, I just got done with the search committee. We'll come in and I say, we want you to succeed. If we hire you, we want you to succeed. And I say perfectly selfishly, because I don't want to do another search. But I think that really helps them feel better, that you're part of us now. Talk to people, and and keep things in perspective too. It's awful hard to be, you know, working your tail off and lose perspective, and also take joy in what you do, because if you take joy in what you do, then it makes it easier and you do a better job.
Along those lines, excuse me, be part of a team. You team with your colleagues and the administrators, and you and your students are kind of a team because you want them to succeed, and you coach them and you teach them, and you know them as people, and I think that means a lot to students to know that the teacher, the professor, is a human being, and you kind of share things other than just the classroom with them. I think that's helpful in establishing the trust and the teamwork that it takes all across the board.
I'll echo some prior comments. So I would talk with your colleagues, oftentimes in kind of adjusting to here, but adjusting to anywhere that you might end up after a doctoral program or after you're transitioning from industry to teaching anywhere but teaching here. Talking with other people about their experiences can be very helpful. I remember having a conversation with Kathy Bishop Clark, and this was a couple years ago. But I was like, well, we're doing this thing in class, and they're just not talking like I want to. She's like, oh, well, you should try having them do it in small groups. And I tried it, and that was like instantly made things better, and it was shooting for what I wanted in the classroom. I wouldn't have thought of doing that if it weren't for talking with a colleague at the time, and that was very helpful. And I also think, to an extent, recognize your limits. Sometimes, especially if you're very active on campus and very engaged with your department and service and research and teaching, it can be very easy to say yes to everything. And that ends up being a really bad situation for everybody. So know when it's okay to say no to some things, but talk with people, seek out mentors and seek out people that you trust and respect, and ask for their opinion and advice and guidance on things, because I think that'll help you as you adjust to working here.
I would say listen to your students. And I say that because I think some of the things that have helped me improve my teaching has been to listen to the comments and feedback from students. And I don't mean the petty gripe stuff that everybody has at times. I mean the serious, when you did this, I really understood it. Or that was a little bit above me, maybe this would be a better approach. Or I really liked blah. Because I've found that my students have helped me understand what they don't get, because it's very hard to step back into that time at which you hadn't had that course. And I think students in small classes and students here will give you feedback. You know, we probably all had that happen. And it's helped me learn how to reframe ways of thinking.
You got to remember what it's like not to know.
Yeah.
That's hard to do.
I think that the general idea that so many have expressed is the relatively small classes and the contact and keeping office hours and having students know that they're welcome to come in and chat, and to make sure that the new person realizes that this place is very much like a family, and there's a lot of interconnection between students in your classes and other classes in different disciplines, whether it's engineering or the nursing instructors that I taught with, and what goes on at the hospital. All of these things that fit together even into the community. The students are not from Chicago and Cleveland and Dallas, Texas. They're all from the local area. They know the system. And if you need something done and you need somebody to help you fix something, they know somebody. It's absolutely amazing what this community of education is like here. The older students, your median age is about 26. I don't know what it is now, 26.
Around there, yeah.
Yeah, that they should know that when they're coming in, that they're coming not into 18-year-olds in their freshman classes, but I had a class where students had to work together, and this one student came to class twice, unprepared, for an evening class, and we met once a week, and we used the Christian Science Monitor as the text. And he was to report on what's something in it. That was his assignment. These two guys, one was a foreman in the mill, and another was another guy, and he took him to the side. He was a freshman. He never missed another time of talking, ever. So it's the unusual cohesiveness of this entity, this body, is wonderful.
Then my last question for the evening is this, and I asked this of some students. One of the people we interviewed was on the planning committee. So imagine you're talking to the planning committee to build a college in Bunny Hollow. What would you tell them? If you could talk to the full committee today, what would you say to that planning committee?
From back then?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
Do you want us to stop so you can think and talk about your interviews? We can stop the tape.
Don't make everything out of steel. It's nice, but I can hear, especially when John could have been on the other corner of the building. I would hear him crystal clear.
Don't make everything out of steel.
And a window in my office would be nice, but I've learned to live without it.
I sort of like the way they worked with the land. I say you did a great job.
Yeah, I agree.
You didn't just go in and flatten everything and build on top of it. You actually paid attention to where the buildings need to go, where the roads need to go, and unobtrusive parking lots for the most part, and things like that. That they did the right thing there, I think. And also, they build with an eye towards expansion, for sure. And they built their buildings very functionally. Johnston Hall, Feskin Hall, and the library have just done so much over the years that if they had used, some crazy guy's architect's ideas that maybe looked really outlandish and wonderful but wouldn't function, then we wouldn't be where we are now.
One of the things about the campus that is somewhat of a detriment, I came in early on a Saturday morning once and was working in my office on a big project, and I came out and it was already dark, and it had snowed, wet sticky snow, about 2 inches. It took me 5 tries to get to the top of the hill and get out of the campus, because they didn't plow anything because it was Saturdays.
Yeah.
So there are some detriments to the campus.
Having the hills, being that bunny hollow. Yeah.
I didn't think I was going to get home.
All right. Do you have any other points you'd like to enter into the record?
Do you know there was a bookstore? The opening, first year, there was a bookstore where down there at the bank, on Manchester Road, there was a branch bank there for a while, Sunset Drive it's called.
Yes.
And that building to your right as you go on, okay, that was the main gate to the old Armco Park.
That's right.
And there was a bookstore. It was actually started by the man whose house we eventually bought, a man named Lewis Macaulay. And his legacy is a lot of scholarships. I'm sure the students from here get Macaulay scholarships. And he started a bookstore, and I'm acquainted with someone who worked for him in the bookstore. And she said that Lewis's idea of a bookstore was that he was a very genteel man, traveled a lot, loved music, supported symphonies, just a lot of culture in him. His idea of a bookstore was that he would have tea ready every afternoon so the professors from the university could come and visit with him and talk about books, and then of course the students would be buying their books there. I mean, the students did buy their books there at first, but it didn't really last very long. It kind of went under.
I remember that.
Yeah, but that's a little piece of history that's kind of forgotten because books were expensive that way. I don't think the professors ever went to have tea anyway, so it didn't work out.
I have one other story that relates to, I traveled a lot in Latin America, that's my regional interest, and I was in Haiti for quite a few days, and in Dominican Republic, and I took a lot of pictures in Haiti of the conditions where people lived and so on. Children, really wonderful little kids, and I'd love to take pictures. And so after class, I showed about 45 minutes of class, and this lady comes up and she's crying something terrible. And I said, did I offend you in some way? Did I do something? Oh, no, sir. She said, are there really children like that in Haiti? And I said, yes, that's a very common, and that's the same thing basically true in Peru or Chile or wherever. And she said, I thought all those pictures on those television programs asking for money for children were just fictitious pictures. And it really touched me how desperately by showing pictures, had touched her life. It's one of those parts of working on this campus that is just so amazing.